Well, I'd like to just welcome you this evening on behalf of Marshall District Library. I'm Shauna Swantek, the head of public services there. My role tonight is really just to assist with technology, and if you have any questions, the chat's a great way to get a hold of me during the presentation. I'll help as well as I can. And thank you to the Marshall Area Garden Club for inviting us to assist in this way. It's really been a pleasure to get to know some of you, our familiar faces from month to month. And I've been learning a lot, so I really appreciate it. And I am very much looking forward to Lynn's presentation. But I am not doing her introduction, so I will ask Carla to take over.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. And it's my pleasure to introduce Lynn O'Shaughnessy. She went from being a computer programmer for 14 years to getting her pilot's license and becoming a flight instructor. She started her own flight school at a local airport and built her own hangar and eventually became a flight test examiner for the FAA, say that right. She has always enjoyed gardening and has pursued it with a passion since 2009. Her outdoor gardens have gone from not much to over an acre of gardens and a very special circle garden that we will hear about tonight. She started growing orchids in 2009. After growing these orchids under lights and in a sunroom for 10 years, she had a greenhouse built and at one time housed 3,000 orchids. Now she has less than 500, but that gives her room to overwinter her coleus plants and grow native plants from seed, which we'll hear about tonight because her circle garden contains natives. She is an accredited orchid judge for the American Orchid Society with the Great Lakes Judging Center and has spoken on many orchid topics throughout the US and Canada. She has earned over 350 American Orchid Society awards for her plants. She loves photography, and since as a child, she had a little brownie camera. And for a point in time, she did wedding photography. Her photos have been published in Orchids and Orchid Digest, and she also had a photo selected for the 2006 AOS calendar and recently won the Monrovia First Signs of Spring photography contest. Let me introduce Lynn, a woman of many talents.
Well, thank you. Let me get the share screen going here and my program up. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. This is what I'm going to do today is hopefully inspire you guys to follow your dreams in your garden. This turned out to be a dream of mine that it took a lot, and it's something I really wanted to do, so I was able to follow it. And I'll talk to you about all the things that went right and all the things that went wrong, and this just what it took to bring this to completion. First of all, this kind of explains who I am and what I do. I believe in my imagination. You have to be able to imagine something. So it's the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. It's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. So keep that in mind. My dad was actually my biggest fan as I was growing up. He told me since I was a little girl that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. He says, if you want to do something, you can do it. And I've done that throughout my entire life, you know, flying and building a hangar. I did that as a single woman, by the way, coming across with all of this stuff, the garden, everything. It's like he just instilled that in me, and he's no longer with us, but he is in my heart and everything that I do. This was me with my flight school, Free Spirit Aviation. And now I'm just the crazy garden lady. And this is not the circle garden, it's one of my other gardens. So I have probably about an acre of other gardens that I tend in addition to the circle garden. And my dad taught me to believe, and a white feather is always the sign that my dad is near. I'm not a stranger to circles. I went to a workshop where we talked about crop circles. And I saw this crop circle design and went home from that workshop and said, I've got to do this in my yard. And this is a 13-foot diameter design that doesn't contain any plants, but it's in the middle of my shade gardens here. And I just ended up, I put the crushed brick around it for walking around it, and it's there. I had to special order the blocks to get them the right size and so forth. So I did this in 2018. But this was the reason I started the circle garden. I had a friend of mine, and by the way, you're going to see dates on all of these. I am not going to repeat dates or say dates or anything like that, but they're there to give you a time frame as I'm going through this. Somebody sent me this picture, and this is also in Michigan. If you haven't been there, I haven't, but I just saw this in Shelby, Michigan at Cherry Point Farm. The labyrinth part didn't fascinate me as much as this did. And when I saw this, I said two things to myself. I said, I want to do this design. I am going to do this design, but I am not going to randomly plant it. I said I couldn't believe somebody actually did a symmetrical design and randomly planted it. I says mine will be symmetrically planted, and I am not going to use rocks. They use rocks to define all of this. I have rocks in my shade garden. I hate rocks. I have more problems with the rocks than I do anything else. So I'm going to do mine different than that. And I am not going to have grass in here that I have to mow for all my pathways. I said it may take me longer to build it, but I am going to put the crushed paver brick, which I have for my other walkways in my other gardens. So the first thing I did was I looked this up and tried to figure out what it was called. It's actually a Taurus Vesica Piscis design. Some places called it sacred geometry, some places called it the seed of life. But if you put these three names into Google, you will get this design. And it's a 12-point design, which is what that one is. The next thing I did was a vision board. I'm really heavy into vision boards, so I printed out this picture, put it in the center. I actually did the design on paper and put that behind it. And then I knew, I didn't know what plants I was going to use, but I knew everything that's going in that design was going to be Michigan native plants. So I just got a bunch of pictures and I put them around here so I could look at this every day and say, this will happen. Then in May in 2019, I went out. This is the area of my yard that I wanted to put it in. By the way, my nephew and my niece both have drones. So they were more than happy to say they would come out and periodically take pictures for me. So my nephew took this, and that's me in the center, just with my arms stretched out, and I superimposed the design in there, approximately how big I was going to have it. I decided I wanted to do it 100-foot diameter. So that's about what this is here. It took me until August of 2019 to get started on it because the ground prep was the only thing I was not going to do myself. I had to hire that. I was not going to take 8 inches of topsoil and field grass and weeds and everything out and try to bring in 8 inches of sandy loam topsoil, which is what this company did for me. So they were in there for a couple of days and they left me with my basic circle. And you can't really see it, but there's the center stake that's in there. So now it was up to me to get started. So my husband had a piece of survey equipment. So we set that up over the middle, and then he let me take it from there because we're both pilots. We understand 360 degrees and how to use, things like that. So all I had to do is just go from the center stake, go out 25 feet, put a stake in the ground, and then draw a circle around it. So it was a 25-foot tape I used, but it was a 50-foot radius circle. Didn't matter where I started, but then from there is when I would turn this survey equipment 30 degrees, go out another 25 feet, put a stake, draw another circle, turn it 30 degrees, go out 25 feet, put a stake and do another circle until I got 12 circles in there. It's just pretty much some basic geometry. So then the next step was covering these lines, because my husband said, now that these lines that you sprayed on the ground, if it rains, they're going to disappear. And I said, okay. So I started putting landscape fabric down because these are my walkways. And this was where I was going to put the crushed brick on top of for the walkways. So I ended up, it was going to take me 1,200 feet of landscape fabric to finish this, putting it all down just for the basic walkways. That's not counting stuff on the edge yet. So I got started. You can see my nephew came out and did a drone shot. So you can see the little pink lines there and some of the landscape fabric down. I think I got 7 of the 12 points done the first day. So I just had to believe I was going to get this done. You're going to see that feather a lot. So the following day, I finished covering all those lines, except for this one on the outside. That one I didn't do yet. So he came out and did another drone shot. Now we can see them all covered. Did a couple of different views of it. So now I had started putting in the crushed gravel. By the way, I did this whole thing with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. No machinery, nothing, other than the guys who did the prep work. That was the only machinery I had in here. The rest of it is all my labor. Continued on. And you notice here, I started just putting bricks in. I was going to line my garden areas. This is going to be a garden area here with bricks instead of stones, the dreaded stones. But here you notice I have every other brick. Well, that was because on this day I came out and noticed that the wind had got picked up and it started blowing my landscape fabric off. I didn't have enough bricks on it holding it down. So I started just picking up some of these bricks, and then I had to bring in more bricks and just start covering this with bricks to keep it from blowing away. So I spent most of that day doing that. And then the next day I decided I wanted to cut the center. The center garden was going to be a 10-foot diameter circle. So I cut that out in the center and then started bringing the gravel or the crushed brick on up around it. So you can see here I've got two of the 12 swirls out done. I started doing little cross pieces. I just have to believe. Here's in the center now. I left a little spot open. I can bring my wheelbarrow in without destroying things. So I started bringing in my topsoil. The topsoil I was using was a 50-50 blend topsoil, which is 50% peat, 50% soil. And filling that in and then putting the bricks around. The bricks are just set on the gravel is all it is. But basically there's about 6 inches of the topsoil. So getting that done, finally got it finished and continued working on the edges. The next day I heard it was going to rain. So I said, well, I got one more line here, this big line going all the way around the garden, I've got to do something with before it rains. I decided to put commercial edging in there to hopefully hold the field grass back. So I stopped what I was doing within the garden and started laying 311 feet of commercial edging. That's what it was going to take. Now I got from here to here left to do. It was it was dug out and ready to lay, but then it started raining. So I had to stop. And I ended up with little ponds in here. So I said, okay, but they went down in about an hour. So they didn't stay with the water in there, which is good because I was wondering how the plants were going to react to all of that. So, and then here's the beautiful sunset we had, but I did manage in between the rainstorms. I got all of the edging in except for that last 11 feet. And I pretty much left that open until I was done because that way I could run the wheelbarrow in and out without going over the edging. Believe, and I finished it. Then the next morning I got up and I saw this. As near as I could tell, here's the feet prints of the critter that did that. It was a wolf, a coyote, dog. I have no idea. He probably saw something underneath. He bit a hole in here to get it, whatever it was, and pulled my landscape fabric out. So it took me a while to lay this all back again because now I have no lines. I'm trying to do it. I'm looking for the little creases that were in here. You can see how I creased this to make these turn. So I was trying to do it with the creases and get it, but I managed to get it back together again. You can see here it is. And I just continued on with putting the crushed brick in. And of course, I keep bouncing back and forth. I have to get something in there to make it all worthwhile. So I got my first plant. This is Rudbeckia laciniata or cutleaf coneflower. These can get up to 7 feet tall. They went in the center. I figured they would be a great center plant for this. So I bought these. They were in bloom. I had to stake them until they could get rooted. So that went in there. That made my day. Now I have something to look at in there. The leaf. Of course, then we got more rain. And because of having this company come in, what they did was they tapered it so that the center, nothing was going to actually settle within the garden. The center is a little higher than the edges. So it ran off. This is a natural, this was the lowest space anyways. And it ran off here and I just ended up putting some of the crushed brick out here in the edge to try and hold this back. I can only do so much at a time. So this was what I had to do just to temporarily fix it. The rains made a little pond in here with my plants, but again, it went down within an hour, so I wasn't too concerned. I have to say that the pollinators found these plants within 2 days. I had butterflies and bees in the middle of my field on these plants. Believe. So now I started filling in some of the garden areas in the design. That was the next step. I laid, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of these, you can see on here, of these little swirls, but I had to have something else that looked like it was making progress. So I started these little garden areas, and this is Agastachy Funiculum or Anise hyssop. And so they were going to go in the center. Eventually, I was going to have 5 plants, the center one, and then 4 of them going around it. And then I was going to have another species going around that. I had decided, by the way, that I was going to have only 2 species in any of the given garden areas. I didn't want like a mishmash of stuff all over the place, just 2 species, something in the center and something around the edges. And then you can see here, I put the great blue lobelia around this one. So I have the tall yellow flowers and the shorter blue flowers. Just kept right on moving. Just kept going. Heck, it didn't take too long. And I started filling these in. So you can see them here. Nothing much new here other than just continuing this design. So you can see I started like about August 8th. Now here it is about a month later. This is how much I got done. So it's looking pretty good. I'm making progress, especially when I'm doing it all with a shovel and a wheelbarrow, carting all of this material out here by myself. I have to say that people asked me, are deer a problem? Because we do have deer. I was using liquid fence, and I just sprayed liquid fence around the perimeter. And the deer, I could see after I did that, where the tracks would come up to it and turn around and go away. So they didn't cross that line. My biggest problem were the turkeys, and that's these tracks here. They'd come in and they'd go in the black dirt and they'd scratch it off and put it on my nice walkways, and then I'd have to fix it, you know, the next day. So the turkeys were a problem, and I had to deal with that. And again, as I was doing this, I really didn't have a complete plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do. So I was just, you know, taking care of things as it went along. I was eventually going to get a fence. So I had to get a fence to keep the turkeys out. By the way, turkeys do not fly, only to roost. They don't know they can fly over the fence and get in. They just don't. So, so I just continued on and kept repairing the damage. The next thing I decided to do is I've got all these areas outside. I've got these little V-shaped areas plus the whole edge to decide what to do with. And I hadn't decided yet. So I thought maybe I'll put a little circle out there. Something told me I wasn't really sure I wanted the little circle, but I put it in anyways. And then I've got clustered mountain mint in here, which is a Michigan native. And I figured I'd wait till the next drone shot and see what it looked like. So here's the next drone shot. And I looked at this and I discovered two things. Number one, because I had filled in around this circle, I lost my design because these bricks actually were defining the design. So everywhere inside here, the bricks did their job. But by not having a brick edge out here, I was losing the design. So, and the other thing I decided was the circle didn't look any good. I was not going to keep the circle there. So circle was going. So what I ended up doing is I ordered 2 more pallets of bricks and brought them in and then started laying the bricks, because this was about 3 inches of crushed gravel or crushed brick. And the bricks were, if you laid them flat like that, were about 3 inches tall. So I just laid the bricks in here so that when you're walking through this area, it's the same level and you can just walk over them. But yet from a drone shot, it would define the area. And I also decided if I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do an edge garden. And one of the reasons I decided that is because I was just doing research on Michigan natives, and there were so many Michigan natives I wanted to use that I didn't want to mess up my design. I didn't want to use any more than 2 species in each of the areas. So, and to keep it symmetrical, what I was doing is this: every other area matched. So these areas here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, were all planted identical. These areas in between will all be identical. So that way it was symmetrical. And then same thing when I went to the middle garden, every other matched, and then the every other in between matched. Same thing with the little gardens in here, every other matched, every other in between matched, which meant that I had room for only 14 natives to go in the design. And to jump ahead here, I now have 64 different native species in the edge garden. And I love it because then I can feature all kinds of other things, even though I'm not using them in the design, and I use it as my educational piece. So I decided to do an edge garden. Believe. Another coyote or whatever got in there and tore it up. And I said to myself, I have really got to start working harder, because I have got to, all I have left is these two little areas here, and just to cover this and get it covered. And then I'd be done with all these critters that are tearing my stuff up. So I started working on it. And then I got to the point where I have a greenhouse, and they said that the weather was going to go down to too cold for my coleus. And I normally bring my coleus in for the winter and then bring it back out in the spring. So I started cutting all my coleus. I had to stop and take care of the coleus. So there's the coleus going in, and just believe that I can do all of this. You can see here, this is all I have left to do, not much. My greenhouse is full of all coleus cuttings, and I'll take care of planting them later. And I got back out to here, and about 2 months after the ground broke for this, I finished putting in all of the crushed paver brick. Now I don't have all of the gardens in yet, but I got the crushed paver brick in. So it took about 2 months to do that, believe. So now I just continued putting the rest of the gardens in, and to start putting the edge garden in. So that's what the edge garden was going to look like. So here's the little paver bricks that were recessed so that you can just walk on them. Oops. And then these are raised up like these. They're like little raised beds. They're only raised up 3 inches. So and I just took my clustered mountain mint out of there and put it in the edge garden. It was going to go in the edge garden. In the meantime, I thought, I wonder if I've got any natives growing around in my yard. So I started researching stuff that was in my yard, and I found this, which is self-heal, Prunella Vulgaris. And it turned out to be a Michigan native. So there it is. I put some of it in my edge garden because I don't have it in the rest of it. By the way, there's 5 plants in here now of the anise hyssop. Bee magnets. Oh my goodness, that stuff is just attracts the bees like nobody's business. So there's a picture of just a couple of spikes of this. You can see how many there are in a cluster with 4 bees on it. So check mark. I finally got the design itself done. Lots left to go, but the design itself is done. And so you can see here, now I'm filling this in. Here's one filled in. I called these the little wedges, the edge gardens coming together. I lay the landscape fabric down for the next one, and I still had all of that to do. So I'm working on it. See the little flags? That's where the gate's going for my fence. So I'm getting that fence in. I'm sick and tired of turkeys. So, and you can see some of the rain and everything, but I do have that completely. And now that last 11 feet I put in. So that was no big deal, even though the line was gone. There's my flock of turkeys that would be out there almost daily running around. So I think there was 18 of them that were in our yard all the time. So here's everything starting to come together with the edge garden. I'm planting things in it. And I'm working here, and the fence people came in and they put the fence up. And I picked this fence. It's kind of like, it's an aluminum fence, powder coated black. And it looks like, I think that it's meant to be like a swimming pool fence. But I like the way it looked. And then some people said, well, geez, you got these bars and critters can still go through those bars. Hold that thought, because a little more down the road here, I'll show you what I decided to do with that. So here I'm just continuing with the edge garden. I ordered some plants from Prairie Moon Nursery. So I wanted some bare root plants, and these are all for the edge garden because as you can probably figure it out, it's going to take lots of plants to fill in this design. So that's going to take a while. But I got these coming for the edge garden. The Brighton Garden Club gave me some of these false sunflower plants, and I use those in the every other garden in between the anise hyssop. So I put 5 plants in the center of the every other garden on the edge. So that helped out a lot. There's me and my fence with the next drone shot. And you can see here with the anise hyssop, that stuff filled in really nicely. Over here, they're not quite so nice because there's only 1 plant in there. It got to be so late in the season that I couldn't get any more. So I was going to have to wait till next year to get some more of those. But here's the edge gardens coming along, moving around. Then the people that did the groundwork for me, the ground prep, they also did paver bricks. It's a paver brick company. They do walkways and stuff too. And they did that other circle design in my garden as well. They were so impressed with all the stuff that I was doing that they sent one of their guys out for the better part of a day with their brick saw. And they cut all of these corners on these bricks to make them nice so that they all came together real nice, and then never charged me. They did it as a donation. Still getting more material, although this was the last of the material I was going to get. This is the plants that I got from Prairie Moon Nursery that I was able to plant because I got more of this going here. But I had decided now that I had been a little further along that the crushed brick in here, see, my walkways in the rest of my gardens are 6 foot wide, and I have crushed brick in there too, and it didn't seem to be a problem. But in here with only 3 foot wide, I just felt like it wasn't comfortable to walk on. So what I was going to do was top dress this, use it as a base, and then top dress this with a smaller crush material. So I've got this as crushed natural, which is all different colored rocks that I'm putting in the wedges. And then I'm going to use small crushed limestone to cover the pathways. That way it'll show up nice when we get the drone shots. So here I am in November with my winter coat on, my mittens, and it's in the 30s, and I'm out there with a shovel and a wheelbarrow trying to finish as much as I can. And this is, remember I said, hold that thought. This is what I ended up doing with the fence. I looked at options of what to cover the fence with, and I didn't want to ruin the look of the fence. So I decided to put bird netting on. And I tell you what, I did this in 2019. I didn't have any problems whatsoever last year. Nothing seemed to be a problem as far as going through it, chewing it, getting, whatever. It did its job and kept the critters out. So I've got 2 check marks here. One is while all of that was going on, I finished all of the base that I was laying down for these little wedges. I've got the bricks down to outline the edge garden, but I decided not to order any more topsoil for the year because then it would sit out all winter. I'd order it fresh in the spring. And then the other check mark was for finishing this on the fence, getting this going. So I just used zip ties all along the fence and put it in. Believed that I could do this. By the way, this is my birthday. So happy birthday to me. And here's where I did have some of that small crushed limestone that I was using underneath here to level these before I put the edges on, the bricks on. So I laid down what I had left, and there it is next to the colored rock so you could see it. I laid down as much as I had left. So that's the check mark, it's done. Now I said, I got to have a sprinkler system. Didn't think about that, but I've got all these plants that I'm going to put in next year, and I got to have a way to water them. And there's no way I'm going to get something out there for this size and make it worthwhile to do it myself. So I hired a company to come in, and they're drawing it off the pond. We have a little over an acre pond out there. So they put this giant pump in and all of the controls and everything, and they showed me that it worked. I've got four stations there. These particular ones are commercial. They're on poles rather than in the ground, and they can pump out up to 30 gallons per minute of water. That's how powerful that pump is. They've got it toned down with the two of them running at the same time. It's about 22 gallons per minute. They shoot out about 60 feet, so they will go a little bit past center, and then the ones on the other side, you know, go, all of them do about 60 feet, so they overlap each other. They show me it worked, and then winterized it. So I got that done. There I am with my coat on, my winter coat, in the garden, getting my last drone shot, and 4 days later it snowed. And this tells you about turkeys. The turkeys just went round and round and round, and they never flew over. This was pristine in there, never a track of any animal that came in. They just don't know they can do it. They'll fly to roost in a tree, but they won't fly over a fence. Now I had to grow my own plants from seed because I knew there was no way I could afford to, well, I probably could if I took out loans to get all the plants I needed to fill this thing. So I just ordered some. I collected some seed of my own. This is the swamp milkweed seed. And I decided to start growing them myself. Now I have a sunroom on the house, so I started them in the sunroom because I keep it a little warmer than I keep the greenhouse. Greenhouse is about 53 degrees in the winter. So I started that. And then I moved them out to the greenhouse. Here in the greenhouse, you can see I put my hand there for size comparison. These are the swamp milkweed plants. And you can see it's only April, so they're growing quite well, and they're going to be ready to go when I'm out there planting. Here's the greenhouse just chock full of little plants. Now I volunteer at the Howell Nature Center, so some of those that I wasn't going to use, we're going to go out to the Howell Nature Center and in their gardens. So at any rate, there's all my stuff, and there I'm starting to plant. That was my first job this year when it came time, was to get the plants out and fill the garden areas. Believe that I can do this. I can't count how many I have left to do. I just put one foot in front of the other and one shovel in front of the other and do it. It's the only way to get it done. Now, because 2020 was COVID, I got all these plants in the ground, and I'm going, I can't get my sprinkler system on because they wouldn't let landscape companies work. So I ran 450 feet of hose from the house. I could only put one sprinkler on at a time because if I put two on, then they didn't even work. So I just put the one on, and all day long I was just moving it around. I says, I gotta wait until I can get that sprinkler system going, but I can't let my plants die in the meantime. So I'm getting all my little plants in, and finally it wasn't too long. It was only a couple of weeks later. I'm done planting. Got all the plants in the design. Okay. Now I go on to the next project. Next project was finishing the edge garden. So I had to order some more material. I got the material in, got that laid, check, got that in. Next thing I had to do was put mulch in around all of this. Figured that would help keep the moisture in too, keep the weeds out. Got all of that done, check, keep going. On the 11th, I got my sprinkler system. Yay, you can see all of this stuff going here. So I could take my hose in and let the sprinkler system do its job. By the way, with this amount of water that comes out, they have this set so that it only goes on for 8 minutes per zone. And this place is soaking wet. So then the next thing I needed to do, here's another picture now that I've got the rest of this edge garden done. And by the way, I was putting rocks in between each of the species going around the edge garden so that they were separated by rocks. But the next job was to finish putting the limestone. So I got another load of crushed limestone in, got all of that to the rest of the walkways. The inside area was now done. Another check mark. Now take a look at this outside area. And I've been going, oh my God, I can't have a garden this nice and have it look this bad as you're walking up to it. So I says, I guess what I got to do is this. I'm going to dig all these weeds out. I am going to put about go about 2 feet or 1.5 feet or so out from the edging that I put in, put another edging in. So I'm going to go around that circle again with another maybe 320 some feet of edging. And then I'm going to put more, put landscape fabric down and more crushed material. That way I can mow up next to it, because the fence itself is outside the edging. The sprinkler systems are outside the edging. So I wanted to include all of that and make it so that it was easy to mow. So here it goes. I started with the gate, went there. Here's the edging. I laid it out. You can see I've dug out the weeds. I've started laying in the edging, putting in the landscape fabric and the crushed brick. So here's the other side, and it was a weedy mess as well. So now, on the 23rd of July, I am finally done with the construction. It will never, ever really be done. I will always be in there tweaking. I still have some things to plant in there, and I would be weeding. I would go in once or twice a week and just I would pull the baby weeds so that they didn't get a chance to become big ones. And then here's a month later, I had taken a picture when some of these yellow flowers were in bloom. Now, it took me 5 months to build this. So there was 3 months of work in 2019 and 2 months of work in 2020. So that's what it took to get this completed. Now at least this, I could walk around this and mow, or my husband could even just bring his riding mower up as he was mowing the field and keep it looking nice. And all I had to do was go in here and take care of it. This is to give you an idea of my property. So here it is on the property, you know, with the house and everything. My other gardens run from here all the way through the shade garden and back up. So that's about the size of my other garden area. And then there's the pond, which is totally on our property. Then I found a circle arch. I says, I got to have a circle arch for a circle garden. And the one I had to get was so big, they had to bring it on a pallet on a semi. That's 9 foot tall and 10 foot wide. Between my husband and I, we were able to stand it up. And some people started asking me, and said, well, what are you going to grow on it? And I hadn't given that any thought, but I went and did some native research, and I've already got the plants in the greenhouse for this year. I'm going to put clematis, native clematis on here, which has little white flowers on it. It's really pretty. So that's what's going to crawl. And I'll put 2 plants on each end and just let it crawl. Just to show you here, these are some of the plants, the species that I grew from seed. By starting them early and getting them going in the greenhouse, and before I put them out, rather than actually planting them in the ground and letting them grow from seed in the ground, I was able to get all of them to have some blooms. Now, not every plant bloomed, but all of them had some plants bloom in their first year, which was really great for me. And then these are winter shots. This garden never ceases to amaze me. This was just a light snow, and it looks like a lace doily. And then this was 12 inches of snow on top here. And I don't know if it's just the limestone, you know, and different bricks in here, and how whatever it is, the snow sunk and so you could see the design even with 12 inches of snow on top of it. It was just, we were photographing something, a phenomena going on in my pond. And I said, why don't you just take a picture of the circle garden? He goes, oh, you should see it. So this is what it looked like. And so the journey continues. This year, I will be just hopefully seeing a lot of these things bloom, wonderfully in here. And a lot of them fill in. I'm probably going to put some stakes around some of these areas because some of them were flopping out into the walkway. So I'll stake and put some just like little twine or something to keep them, in their place, and just enjoying it, just weeding it and enjoying it. So there it is, as of that August picture. And there's my information. So if anyone wants to email me, I am on Facebook. On Facebook, I have an album that I've been running for 6 years. This is the 6th year now, where I call it my garden journey. And so if you're my Facebook friend, you can follow what I'm doing in the yard, wherever it is, and just enjoy. Each picture has comments on it as to what it's showing. And then these are some of the Michigan Garden Club groups that we've got going. They've got a few others as well. I just put in the ones that mainly had to do with photography or plants. There's some others now. I just haven't added them to the list. So at this point, I guess I'll take some questions. So I'm going to stop share. Did everybody get what they want off of here? If not, I'll send it to you.
Well, thank you, Lynn. There's a few questions in the chat that I will ask, and if Garden Club leadership wants to chime in, of course, please do.
Okay.
How are you keeping the plants from spreading and taking over?
Well, that was my job this spring so far. I took a flat shovel and went out and chopped all the runners, and I actually planted the runners. I gave some of them away to someone that has a fen on their property, and they're going to be planting some of them. I'm giving them to the nature center, so I'm actually trying to utilize them rather than throw them out. But I have to, for the clustered mountain mint, the bee balm, and there was the 2 kinds of bee balm that I have. Those plants are members of the mint family. They do throw out runners and they do spread. So last year on the clustered mountain mint that I had in the edge garden, I was continually I would just go out and chop it. It kind of runs on the surface, so it's easy to see. So I'm going to have to do the same thing. Right now I've got it really nicely cut so that the mint plants are in their spots, and I'll just have to keep up with that like I would weeds. So
Mint will give you a run for your money that way.
I know they will.
Yeah. I just want to be sure at some point you come back and read the comments, because people are really just enamored and think you should be on TV. And there are adjectives like glorious. It's beautiful. Would you mind sharing an estimate of cost, how much you've invested in the project?
That's a question that no one's asked. I have to tell you that another garden club asked, how much material did I move with a shovel and a wheelbarrow? That one I researched and I went back and looked up. I moved 135 yards of material, 29.5 tons of material, because some stuff was sold by the ton, and 5,022 bricks. So all by myself within 5 months. But I haven't had that question about the cost. I do know, I mean, I think the fence was like $4,000. I think the sprinkler system was about $11,000. And I had them back this year since I had I had done all the work of connecting to the electric in my house and putting the pump out there and all of that. I had them put in a total sprinkler system for the rest of my gardens in 2020. So now I have a total sprinkler system for everything. But but I can't, I don't know. I would have to go back and look at all of those receipts again and get dollar values.
Or maybe don't, Lynn. Maybe you don't want to add them up. That's fine too.
I have to tell you that both my parents have passed away now, and part of that is almost like their legacy to me. The money that they left gave me the freedom to do this and follow my dream.
Well, that just brings that feather right back to mind. That's beautiful. This is very gardening oriented. Do you recommend the 50-50 peat soil combination?
I love that soil. I have it in other parts of my garden, and I would put a plant in that soil. There was one time I put something in and then decided I didn't want it there about a week later, and I picked it up, and all these little white roots were going out everywhere from it. It was a soil that didn't get heavy, and it retained enough moisture, because I have a clay-based soil here. That's basically what's down below is the clay base. And so ever since I saw that, I started using that exclusively. Now I know that there's some plants that like a dryer that may not appreciate this, but when I talk to people, they said you're better off not having little zones of this kind of soil, then this kind of soil, then this kind of soil. Just pick a soil and put it in there and see what works. And if something totally doesn't work, which I'm finding a few in the edge garden may not work, then just skip it. So, but everything so far was doing pretty good in the garden itself, in the design.
Thank you. This question goes way back to early in your presentation. Do you have a theory, maybe from the presentation you attended, about where most crop circles come from?
Well, the person that did the workshop had talked about that, and a lot of people, I see the thing on there, aliens ? That's probably what a lot of people think. But you know, she raised the question. She said a lot of people are actually saying that they're coming from Mother Earth, that they're actually coming from underneath the soil, underneath the ground, that Mother Earth is doing it. I don't know. I have no clue. Howell actually had a crop circle. Not as elaborate as the ones that we see in England, but they had one. So I just saw it in pictures. I didn't get to see it in real life, but you know, it's fascinating. It was really fascinating.
That is a very interesting idea. Apart from the perimeter plantings, is it true that there are 42 plant areas within the circle?
Oh, no, there's
43.
37. It's a 12-point design with 3 gardens each, a little garden, a middle garden, and then the outer garden. So that's 36. And then the center is 37. And the edge garden is its own deal.
I'm looking at the crown of your garden behind you right now.
It's a 12-point design.
Looks like a crown. It's gorgeous. Well, unless I have missed a question, I think that's all we see in the chat. If someone wanted to unmute and ask something directly, I'm sure that would be welcome.
Okay, I see one that says for a fence. How about flexible twigs as fencing? I didn't want anything that was going to give me a lot of work. That's why I went with the metal fence that I did. I've had even the split rail fences, and they rot after a while. And I figure at least this was going to give me less work. I'd rather put my work into the plants. So that's why I went with the fence that I got. So anybody else?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes.
Joanne. Go ahead.
Well, no, I wasn't. I was the one that talked about the twig fence. I wasn't talking about your outside fence. I was talking about keeping the flowers from falling onto the paths. And
Again, oh, go ahead.
I have made several fences like that, sometimes putting them at an angle. So you have a triangle looking fence, or putting them in as a hoop, overlapping the hoop.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
went
get what
out.
I mean,
I went
do
out
ya?
and got the fiberglass stakes, or maybe they're metal covered with green plastic. They're green, so they don't show up that well. And I have like about 300 of them, so I can.
You've got it covered then.
Yeah, I can put them in anywhere, whether it be in the edge garden. Some
Yeah.
of those plants were flopping too, or in the other areas, and it would be no problem. I figured, again, I wanted something that I could use, reuse, or even leave there if I needed to.
That's good.
Lynn, your geometric designs, instead of being perfectly square, the four-sided figures have kind of a concave to it, and it's perfect. How did you achieve that?
If you were to look at them or measure them on the ground, they're not exactly matching each other, but they're close enough that from the drone shots, they look just fine.
But how did you get the concave effect instead of a straight line?
Well, that's from the circles when I use the tool, the survey tool, and drew the lines on the ground. Then when I laid the landscape fabric down, the landscape fabric was centered on those lines. So I just went, I started the landscape fabric, went out maybe about 3 feet, and then creased it so that it kept turning and turning and turning, and so that it would form a circle.
Wow.
So it's just following the landscape fabric.
Wow.
And like I said, it's not perfect. If you were to measure them, you'll find a few of them a little smaller, a few of them a little bigger, but it's close enough that the drone shots don't show it.
Do we have any other questions for our speaker?
I have one. Going back to your knowledge of orchids, recently on Facebook, someone sent a picture of a pineapple orchid, a cluster of yellow orchids that look like a pineapple that's had the outside skin. Have you ever heard of that? Or is that a manipulated picture?
I'd have to see the picture to know. I can't say that. I mean, a lot of orchids have common names, so that you know what they are. I can't say that brings to mind a picture, but it may be a kind that I don't grow. I tend to specialize in the group of orchids called pleurothalids, which are many times insignificant, small flowers. So, but I like to be different. I like growing things that are different. If I saw a picture, I could let you know.
I understand.
Well, I'd like to extend our appreciation to Lynn for this amazing program. And fortunately, it's been recorded, so we will send it out in a few days. And so you'll have the opportunity to rewatch it or share it with friends. And with that, could we have a round of applause? And I'm sure there's a way to do that in the chat to show Lynn our appreciation.
This is what we do at the library.